would like to introduce our next speaker and invite him to the podium, Gil Quiniones from Exelon Group, ComEd, part of ComEd as well. They're Chicago-based and Fortune 200 energy company with about 10 million customers serving that part of the country. So, honored, please come on board, and then he'll be joined later. Exactly, by Michael Castillo, a financial reporter for Fortune. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I know Michael and I will do a little Q&A. I know we're the last one in the crowd, so we're going to try and make this as interesting as possible. It's always great for me to be back in New York. I spent over a decade leading the New York State Power Authority here, which is the largest state-owned electric utility, and before that, I worked for Mayor Michael Bloomberg during his first term after 9/11 and helped in the rebuilding of New York City. And before that, I worked for the utility here, a cousin of my current utility in Chicago called ComEd Company of New York. So for those of you who are New Yorkers, I'm still a Yankees fan, even though I'm a Chicago one right now. And I thought I'd start today by giving you a brief overview of ComEd. It's an M, not ComEd, ComEd, Commonwealth Edison. And that's the company that I have the privilege of leading in Chicago and Northern Illinois. But before I begin, I'm sure you've seen this a million times today. Just want to direct you to some cautionary statements. It reminds you that I will make forward-looking statements that are subject to risks and uncertainties and apply only as of the date of this presentation. Now, who is Exelon and who is ComEd? Exelon is our parent company. Exelon is the largest transmission and distribution utility in the United States. ComEd is one of the 6 utilities owned and operated by Exelon. And we provide, again, just transmission and distribution. So we're a delivery company in the respective regions where we operate. Now, while some of my operating companies have a natural gas distribution business, Commonwealth Edison, or ComEd, is only an electric delivery company. Now, as a result of the critical and regulated nature of our business, we are subject to oversight and direction across several key administrative bodies, both at the federal and state level. We're a regulated monopoly. Exelon's transmission networks are regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or we call FERC. And we are also part of the PJM, which is a 13-state regional transmission system operator. It's kind of like a regional grid operator, which ensures that there's adequate energy and capacity for those various states. Finally, ComEd's distribution networks are subject to the regulation at the state level by what we call the Illinois Commerce Commission. Here in New York, it's called the New York State Public Service Commission. As I'll explain shortly, balancing the direction provided across stakeholders is critical to ensuring the energy transformation is executed reliably, affordably, and equitably. This coordination has become increasingly critical as artificial intelligence, I know I've heard that word several times in the previous presentation, has grown along with its demands on the grid. And you'll see that the impact of AI to us is a little bit different than the other industries. ComEd, the utility that I lead, provides an excellent case study for how the power needs of AI complement the progress being made in the energy transformation. At ComEd, we serve 4 million metered premises. Those are residential and commercial customers, over 9 million individuals across Northern Illinois. That's about 70% of the population of the state of Illinois. We are the largest utility in the Midwest and the 4th largest in the United States. We are in the middle of In fact, we're larger than Con Edison Company of New York, my former company. We are in the middle of finalizing our first multi-year grid plan under the Illinois climate and energy law called the Climate Equitable and Jobs Act. That was passed in September of 2021. This grid plan is designed to fulfill the vision set forth in that legislation. In short, we call that CEJA, Climate Equitable Jobs Act, which positions Illinois as a leader on climate policy and clean energy job creation. The grid plan also includes investments necessary to continue to support statewide economic development. That is a top priority of our governor, Governor J.B. Pritzker, and it includes supporting the high-powered computing and data processing associated with AI. The grid plan builds on strategic investments made over the last 15 years, during which time ComEd has enhanced its performance across every major metric to create the foundation for the progress we will make going forward. For example, the investments we have made in advanced metering infrastructure, along with other smart grid technologies to make our grid a more self-healing grid, really has enhanced the reliability and resiliency of our grid. In fact, last year, PA Consulting ranked our utility as the most reliable utility in the United States. ComEd has made other investments to enable deeper energy efficiency. Since 2008, this has saved customers, ComEd customers, roughly $10 billion in their bills and counting. And that positions us well to accommodate the increasing demand in power we're seeing today. In addition, we have invested to ensure the grid's resiliency to adapt to severe weather events. Just this year, we really were put to test because there were 2 dates in July where northern Illinois, including Chicago, was hit by 44 tornadoes. And about 4 of them are EF2, the strong ones, so they're about 110-mile-an-hour tornadoes. And the number of tornadoes is really twice the historical average. So it's been challenging for us. So the grid investments that we're making have positioned ComEd to attract and handle the demands of severe weather events, but also those that are associated with increased reliance on the grid by artificial intelligence. Turning on to this slide, this is my 5th slide, we outline the projected investment associated with the spend detailed in our grid plan that we submit to our regulators. This investment drives growth in what we call in utility parlance rate base. Rate base is essentially the sets of assets on which we received a regulated, authorized rate of return from our state and federal regulators. As you can see here on this chart, our investment needs are growing over time. Much of this spend is driven by the state's vision for an equitable clean energy future, where ComEd and our grid has a major role to play. The law, CEJA, which I mentioned before, anticipates that customer needs and industry will drive an increase in our investments over time. However, another large driver of this investment need is the growth in high-density load, particularly data centers, including those that power AI engines. You can see that growth in our transmission spend, represented by the purple bars, which was up $700 million from our prior 4-year forecast as a result of the need to direct power to these large buildings. But before I turn to the data center sector, I will spend some time talking about how CEJA drives our spending needs and how they complement what's required to meet the growing energy demands of AI. One of the bigger aspirations of CEJA is its call for carbon-free grid by 2050. This will drive growth of renewable generation, such as wind and solar, and our grid must be able to manage those resources. Indeed, those resources will be increasingly used to meet the demand associated with AI-purposed data centers. Now, distributed energy resources like rooftop solar and battery storage are also on the rise, driven in part by the goal for a carbon-free grid in our state. At ComEd, we will be continuing to invest in technologies that enhance the flexibility of the grid to manage the two-way and multi-way power flow associated with all these assets that are now getting connected to our grid. Facilitating the addition of these resources enables consumers to reduce their energy cost by selling electricity they generate back to the grid. It also provides the grid another source of generation to accommodate increased energy demand from AI and other industries. Such resources also support CEJA's goals, our state climate goal, to have at least 1 million electric vehicles in the state of Illinois by 2030. Currently, we have about over 100,000, 120,000 roughly, but we're seeing a very fast growth of EV, about 34% annually. So, as you can see, the energy transition is driving the need to invest in the grid. And if done right, these investments can also support the ability to capitalize on the economic opportunity associated with AI. Now, let me explain why our territory in Chicago and Northern Illinois has come to have a front row seat to the growing power needs associated with AI. ComEd has a long history of working with data centers. As a matter of fact, we connected our first one 25 years ago. However, over the last several years, our service territory has emerged as one of the nation's top 5 destinations for data center investment. Part of that certainly is thanks to a data center tax incentive that the Illinois legislature passed into law in 2019. But a big contributor is the unique set of desirable qualities offered by our grid and our region. I mentioned we are number 1 in the United States when it comes to reliability. This is really a major consideration by data centers. Our reliability has been strengthened with the investments we've made in smart grid technology, including a fiber optic and private wireless network communication infrastructure layered on top of our grid. The CEO of a data center called CyrusOne broke ground last month just west of Chicago in Aurora and said that the reliability was really the major factor in the company's decision to locate in our region. Furthermore, electricity cost is a key input for data centers because they're large power users, and we at ComEd have an edge here as well. Our commercial and industrial customers enjoy average bills that were 19% less and 44% less, respectively, than bills in the top 20 metropolitan areas in the U.S. in 2023. So we are a good deal. Combined with ComEd's reliability, our affordable rates mean customers get above average performance at below average costs. Now, we also have geographical advantages. ComEd's service territory contains urban, suburban, exurban, and vast rural locations, so high-density load customers can choose depending on their needs. Think of it as about 100 miles south of Chicago, all the way to the borders of Iowa, Wisconsin, and then Lake Michigan. That's about 11,450 square mile service territory. And Chicago is also located at a convergence point of fiber optic networks that data center can connect to, and it's right in the middle of the country. So we check a lot of the boxes that data center developers look for when they consider sites. And when you combine these attributes with our white glove concierge-like service, it makes a powerful value proposition to attract these customers. Right now, as I'm standing before you today, there are 30 active data center projects in some phase of ComEd engineering or construction. That means the developer has paid deposits to start engineering, and in most cases, we've already ordered large, expensive equipment such as transformers and breakers for the substations that are required for those data centers. But it's not just the sheer number of data centers coming to our region. Over the last 5 years, we have seen a significant increase in the size and the scale of those data centers. The new projects we're seeing today are 5 to 10 times bigger than those we saw just 3 years ago. To illustrate, let me give you an example. ComEd currently provides power to about 75 existing in-service data centers. They've been there for a while, and their cumulative load is just over 500 megawatts. A megawatt is about the power you need to power about 1,000 homes. That's the way to think about it. With many still of those data centers, they're still ramping up. Roughly speaking, another rule of thumb, 500 megawatts is what it would take to power about 900 to 1,000 big box retail stores like Walmart or Costco. That's what 500 megawatts is. Of the data centers in the engineering phase across Exelon, the vast majority of which is at ComEd, and the expected load would be over 11,000 megawatts, or in our parlance, 11 gigawatts. This would amount to a significant addition to our peak electrical demand. Mind you, each project has multi-year ramp-up schedules. You know, when they build a data center, it's not like all the power is right there. It takes about 7 to 10 years for that power to ramp up. But these projections benefit from the activity we've already witnessed and the substantial economic commitments these customers are bringing. In 2023 alone, data center developers earmarked over $5 billion in capital investment in ComEd's region. And that number, certainly, I'm pretty sure, will be much larger this year in 2024. So clearly, the proliferation of AI, which has significantly higher power demands than conventional computing, is a factor in the increased scale of data centers. I visited the data center in DeKalb, which is in the western part of our territory, west of Chicago. Meta is building 5 data centers there. They are massive, and it's something to behold. Now, I was told by the Meta person giving me the tour, because I asked him, is this an AI data center? No. If this was an AI data center, we would have given you an ear protection device, because it would be noisy, because there's a lot of fan that's trying to cool those GPUs. So, let me talk a little bit about Meta. In 2021, ComEd enlivened Meta's DeKalb data center. This is a massive $1 billion plus project with 5 buildings that are each the length of 4 football fields or 1 aircraft carrier. And earlier this year, we announced the launch of the Compass data center project closer to Chicago, which is redeveloping the 200-acre former Sears headquarters campus. I think you guys are too young to know about Sears. Some of you probably have heard about it. I'm sure most of us remember the catalog and what a dominant retail force that was. That was the Amazon of our days. So this is indicative of the transformation underway as a major company from the analog era gives way to one that heralds the digital future. And it allows us to take what was a dormant campus and leverage its existing infrastructure and grid connection to get this project online quickly, exactly what our customers are looking for. And this is just one example. New projects continue to come to us that are comparable in size or much larger. And it's not just data centers. We've seen other what we call high-density load customers launching manufacturing, especially with the effort to reshore manufacturing, and other complexes in our territory, a couple of examples of which are shown here. We're hosting customers who don't fit neatly into a traditional economic sector because they are exploring completely new digital frontiers. The most high-profile recent project is called the Illinois Quantum and Microelectronics Park. This is a quantum computing campus that will be built on the site of the former U.S. Steel Southworks, which is on the southeast side of the city of Chicago. The centerpiece of the complex is a utility-scale quantum computer from a company called PsiQuantum. That computer is capable of providing precise answers for computational problems beyond the reach of conventional computers. To be honest, I'm still trying to understand what quantum computing is, but I know they require a lot of power. This has the potential, I've been told, this has the potential to achieve breakthroughs in major industries like financial services, pharmaceuticals, material and manufacturing, and yes, even ComEd's own industry, the energy industry. Again, we see a titan of 20th century industry, steel, making way for a highly advanced 21st century technology that could be an anchor for the Chicago region's economy in the decades to come. So there is tremendous value in investment from data centers and other high-tech companies and organizations. Already we've seen these projects create hundreds of permanent jobs and thousands of union construction jobs, not to mention the tax revenue they generate. And while these new customers bring opportunity, we are also responsible for serving every customer in our service territory, big and small, and in an equitable way. That is the reality of being a regulated monopoly. So we remain engaged with state, regulatory, and industry stakeholders to ensure we're striking the right balance between economic development and customer equity. The needs of prospective data center customers must never interfere with our ongoing commitment to provide reliable and affordable service to the region's existing customers. That includes both ensuring that these customers are bearing their fair share, when I say these customers, the data centers, of the cost of being part of the grid, no matter how they connect to it, and that the pace of activity does not outstrip our access to affordable generation. This second element is particularly important to monitor in light of our state goals to add more zero-carbon generation like wind and solar, given the pending retirement of coal and gas and older gas plants. Accordingly, ComEd and our other Exelon utilities have advocated for policies that promote equal access and fair cost allocation for the grid, along with cost-effective generation resource adequacy measures. And as I've noted before, there's this group called PJM, the Regional Transmission Organization, that is responsible for organizing the wholesale generation supply market and the reliability of the region. We are working with them. In fact, in July, because of this increase in demand, when they conducted their auction on what's needed to be built in that footprint, the prices really came back very, very high. So this strong price signals, sends a signal that more needs to be done, and we are actively engaging with stakeholders at the federal, state, and local levels in all of our jurisdictions to develop solutions. At ComEd, we talk about how important it is for us to meet the moment. We have done that throughout our history, which spans over 100 years, and we know we'll continue to do so for the next 100 years as well. It is an exciting, dynamic time in the energy industry, to be sure. but that has always been the case. And at ComEd, we relish the challenge of keeping up. It's what drew most of us to the industry. We recognize that we have a pivotal role to play in both the digital transformation and the energy transformation. Both are gaining momentum. We are ready to play that role on behalf of our customers and ensure that we are helping our jurisdictions meet their ambitious energy and economic goals in the years ahead, including the exciting field of artificial intelligence and quantum computing. So thank you very much for your interest in ComEd and the power sector. Hopefully I've provided you a different slant on how AI is impacting our industry. Those items that you heard from the previous speakers are also impacting us. If I can just give you one factoid, we believe in our industry the first area where we will apply AI will be in customer service, in our call centers, intelligent agents, basically. Not that we would, instantly remove all of our customer service representatives, but we believe that we can provide them with intelligent assistance that can help them perform their jobs better. So again, thank you so much, and now I look forward to Michael and I doing a little ham and egg up here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wonderful job.
What?
Wonderful job.
Thank you.
We'd like to invite Michael de Castillo, the finance reporter for Fortune.
Looking forward to talking. Thank you. You make my job so much easier when there's an interesting presentation before. I'm glad that you mentioned that you're a Yankees fan. Since we are at the end of our event here, I just want to take a moment and do a poll here. How many of you was that a good thing? How many Yankees fans do we have in the audience? All right, cool. How many Mets fans do we have in the audience? Oh, goodness. All right.
There's a few.
Okay. So I wanted to do that poll, though, because Gil spent a lot of time in New York. In fact, I think it's fair to say, in some ways, he sort of cut his teeth in the power business here in the city. And while Chicago has long been a center of American trade, from transportation to commodities and energy, I want to just briefly bring it home here to New York for all of our New Yorkers in the audience. I love the fact that you mentioned the time that you spent working with Mayor Bloomberg. If we could just start there and kind of like briefly, let's go into a little more detail there. When was this? What were you doing? And sort of like, what was the mayor's ask when you started working with him?
So thank you.
Yes.
So after 9/11, for those of you who were here, there was a lot of talk that people were going to be leaving New York City. And just an exodus of citizens. So the challenge really after 9/11 is how do we rebuild New York City? And Mayor Bloomberg and his team approached me and said, well, if we're going to rebuild New York City, we're going to need energy and electricity. Interestingly, during that time, there was actually a tightness in the capacity supply of electricity in New York City. So, all the rezoning in Brooklyn, Williamsburg and Greenpoint, downtown Brooklyn, far west side, now called Hudson Yards.
Tightness is a nice way to put it, right?
It was tight. And so we had to figure out how to build more capacity here. So decisions in electricity is not really done at the local level. So we had to advocate at the state and partner with the state. And a power plant was built in Northwest Queens in Astoria, a couple of power plants, and then a transmission line from northern New Jersey to the west side of Manhattan, West 49th Street, where you have the passenger ship terminal.
And Gil, could you tell us a little bit about sort of like what that early experience working with city government and state government taught you that you sort of find yourself applying on a day-to-day basis in your job today?
Yeah, I love working for the city and the state. We had a mayor here in the old days. His name is Mayor Ed Koch. Ed Koch said that public service is one of the most noble professions when done right. And it's true, because what you do in government impacts people's lives immediately, especially at the city level. You know, it's either you're filling up the potholes or not, or you're picking up the garbage or not. There's instant feedback. And that's what Mayor Bloomberg always told us, that, you know, he told me that I was going to get, I would have to take a huge pay cut, because I was working for ComEd at the time, to join his administration, but he said it would be a great and a fulfilling job, and he was correct. I did tell him that I can't do $1 a year like he did.
And so not only has the times changed a lot, but your geography has changed a lot since then. You walked us through in your talk a little bit about how the changing demands are impacting the way that you do business. I'd like to break off a couple of those moments from your talk and kind of go in a little deeper. Can we start off with just like a quick little review of the three biggest demands on the power grid today, by sector? And then if we can, maybe each one of those give us an example of a company in the Chicago or Illinois area.
So in general, in the electric utility industry, electric demand for the past, I would say, 2 decades, maybe at least 15 years, electric demand has been flat or declining because of energy efficiency primarily, and more service economy rather than heavy manufacturing, part of globalization. But I would say the past 2 years, the advent of data centers. First, it was just data centers to support the internet and streaming, et cetera. Most of the data centers in Illinois right now are not really AI data centers yet. They're just normal data centers. That's one sector that's powering growth in electric demand. The other one is the reshoring that's been happening for manufacturing post-COVID. There's I think aside from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act, I think there's a realization after COVID that you really need to have some products made in the United States, or at least in countries close to us and friendly to us. So they're reshoring. And for example, in Illinois, the Stellantis plant that was mothballed will be repurposed, and they're
really
going
quick
to
for people who don't know, what was the Stellantis plant and how's it being repurposed?
Stellantis used to make, it was former Chrysler. They used to make cars, standard cars. Now they're going to be making electric vehicles and batteries. There's also a big manufacturer coming to Illinois called Gotion, Gotion. They're making a $2.5 billion investment to make batteries in Illinois, just south of Chicago, a place called Manteno. Rivian, for those of you who know, is based in Normal, Illinois, and a electric school bus manufacturer and electric truck manufacturer called Lion Electric from Canada is also situated in Joliet, Illinois. So it's not just data center. We're also seeing, being Chicago a hub for transportation, companies that are making sustainable aviation fuel for airlines. So big industry, green hydrogen or hydrogen production. So those are, I would call, manufacturing plus data centers driving the growth. It's also interesting that there's been growth in the suburbs, so just more developments.
I love that.
Are happening as well.
I'm so fascinated by this idea that this Sears Tower is being repurposed, that this old Chrysler affiliate is being repurposed, and we're seeing these old giant names. They're still around a little bit, but kind of evolving into these new companies.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us a little bit about the role that you're playing in sort of attracting those companies? Because if you look at the fine print that a lot of these agreements to come to different states around the United States, there's frequently power grid considerations. So at what point do you get involved in sort of helping attract these companies to your state?
For high density load customers, whether they're data centers or quantum or manufacturing, they come to us first.
Okay.
Second, probably the latest.
First, the government asking about tax breaks. Second, you.
They actually come to us first.
Do they?
And so we work very closely with state governments and local governments to make sure that we are all, we have unity of message and unity of mission, because you don't want these companies to play one against the other. And also just to make sure those deals happen, because it's a competition. Other states are also trying to attract those businesses, and we want them to come to Illinois.
Tell me a little bit about this, the idea that some of these facilities you have to wear earplugs, I think is really interesting. 'Cause as an outsider, I imagine just sort of like a one-size-fits-all service where there's generators creating power to get our light bulbs on or in our internet running. But the idea that these are customized, that they serve different purposes. Without getting too much in the weeds, can you talk to us a little bit about how that customization evolves, and why isn't it just a matter of plugging in a plug to a bigger charger?
Well, when I mentioned that was the Meta data center. Meta's data centers are designed exactly the same. They're like the letter H. So the two longer legs where they put the computers. The middle is their office, basically. And inside, it's very sophisticated. The big thing that they need to do is to be able to extract heat. So their ventilation and air conditioning system is very sophisticated. But when I asked the head of the data center, is this an AI data center? I said, no. If this was AI, we would be wearing.
How much of your work, I must admit, I imagine you frequently sitting behind a desk, kind of typing on a computer.
I'm always out.
Right. So talk to us about that. What does it look like, boots on the ground for you? Where are you going? What are you doing?
I told you we cover 11,450 square miles. We have 27 what I call regional centers where we have our line workers. We have about 6,600 employees, and 3,500 are union line workers, and they are in our regional offices. So I visit them a lot. I'm always out, especially during storms, right? As we're trying to restore power. You have to be out nowadays because people have very little patience if they don't have power. In the past, we used to have at least 3 days of grace. Now, forget it. My social media handles blow up during storms. Gil, where the hell is my power? Giving me their address.
I love that.
So it's the life of an electric utility CEO is interesting from that perspective, but also now with this growth, I told you it's been flat and declining. Now it's growing and growing fast because a lot of these companies have a lot of money. Microsoft, Meta, Google. When they say we're going to build a $10 billion data center, I mean, they can do it, right? Money is not the object. It's not the problem. The challenge is, do we have enough power to power the data center? And so it's interesting.
I want to ask one follow-up there, but I'm mindful of the time, and I want to make sure we wrap up looking at the future. So I'm going to ask you to keep the answer here real brief. Just pick one bullet point, all right? How many of you are currently CEOs? Raise your hand. All right, how many of you are aspiring CEOs? Raise your hand. Awesome. I love that. Okay, cool. So I'm glad that you mentioned the time that you spent with unions. I walked through a giant protest on the way here today. You probably will see it on the way out if you didn't see it on the way in. One tip as a CEO of a big company for dealing with union employees.
We're fortunate. We have a very productive and very good relationship with our union at ComEd. To me, it's really about transparency and engagement. I meet with our union leadership often.
Yeah.
And, it's a give and take. And in our case, they also know that what we do impacts impacts life and safety, right? And many are oftentimes, you guys think about us when you flip the switch and the power's not there.
Yeah.
Right? You just assume that the power is going to be there. But behind all of it, you have all these line workers that are working hard in all kinds of conditions. And it's being an electrical line worker is a great job.
Yeah.
You know, it only requires a high school education. After 5 years in a job, after you go through our apprenticeship training, you can earn $120,000 a year.
Amazing.
You know, you're right into middle class. Not in New York City, but they probably, ComEd doesn't pay a little bit higher. Unless you're in a rent-stabilized apartment, you'll find.
Great tip, Gil. I want to make sure we get to the end here.
Yeah.
One last thought you wanted to add real quick?
No.
No? Okay. So you recently crossed an exciting milestone in a $50 million grant that was given to your company. You had to fight for that grant, though. It wasn't an easy process. Very briefly, you know, what was one of the obstacles in getting this grant, and how are you guys going to be spending that $50 million?
So part of the bipartisan infrastructure act, we call it IIJA, the Biden administration, we won on a competitive basis $50 million to modernize the grid in the city of Rockford, Illinois, which is, again, northwest of Chicago. And we will use that money to make the grid more resilient to severe weather events, but also to configure it so that it can accommodate more solar, it can accommodate more batteries, it can accommodate EV charging stations, and that customers can have more control and interaction with how they use energy. So we're really, really excited. It's going to be a test bed, and we think we're going to be doing it in a way that it can be replicated in similar places across the country.
Love that. So a little skeptical here. We just saw a big election come and go. Decided for many, many reasons, which we won't get into. But as always, one of the big reasons was taxes. Let's talk just very briefly about what is the role in tax-subsidized programs like you've got. There might be some skeptics out there who think that why are my tax dollars helping this guy give power to his customers?
Yeah. I mean, certainly it's a new administration. There will be changes in federal energy policy. But my gut feel is that investments in infrastructure will probably be less susceptible to cuts or elimination. A lot of the infrastructure investments also have been earmarked in red states.
Yeah.
And a lot of those elected officials are going to be fighting for those. And really what we're doing in Rockford is going to be something that is going to be great because it can be replicated in other jurisdictions. We've purposely designed it so that other Rockfords around the United States can look at that and say, okay, here's how the grid of the future will look like.
One more question, Gil. I love the idea of what CEOs are doing with their chess pieces before big events happen. And there's perhaps no other time for us to have more of a concrete idea of a big event than a transition of power. So could you talk to us a little bit about sort of like where are you moving your chess pieces to sort of get ready for a new president? It was, I think, notable that there was a bipartisan program led by the Biden-Harris administration that gave the $50 million. Sort of like, how are you positioning your staff, your employees, your hardware, your software, to sort of anticipate what is going to be a pretty significant transition of power? No pun intended.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Well, there's one trend I think that's not dependent on whatever administration you have. This growth in AI and data centers is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's really what's powering the demand growth in our sector. I think bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. is also something that both parties share, and that's driving the growth. More and more severe weather events. Who would have thought that we would get 44 tornadoes in July 15. A few of them right in the middle of the city of Chicago, right, with all the sirens howling for a while and telling people you got to stay, inside your home and in safe areas. So I think severe weather events is going to be more frequent and more intense. Manufacturing will continue to be a bipartisan issue. And I think this data center growth is just happening.
So to paraphrase, you're focusing on what they have in common as opposed
Correct.
to...
What they have in common, and I think those drivers will depend on us modernizing and enhancing our grid, because none of those will happen if we don't have a modern grid. None.
Gil, thank you so much for joining us. Please give him a round of applause.
Thank you.